Hi everyone, welcome to this second episode of CSEC Biology with Mr. Charles. Today we will be looking at water relations in plants. Our objectives for these lessons is 1. Describe the mechanism of movement of water through a flowering plant. Explain the effects of temperature, humidity, wind speed, and light intensity on the rate of transpiration. List the importance of transpiration and outline adaptations of plants to reduce the rate of transpiration, store water, and increase the uptake of water. So let us look at the mechanisms of movement of water through a flowering plant. Okay, so water enters the hair cells, the root hair cells, by osmosis. It then travels across the root cortex, okay, by osmosis and diffusion. When the water moves past one root cortex cell to the next, okay, through the two membranes of the cells, that's called osmosis. If the water molecules pass around the cells, it is called diffusion. Okay, so the water can take two pathways from the soil to the xylem of the leaf. It can pass through the root cortex cells from one cell to the next, and it can pass around the root cortex cells. Okay, if it passes through the root cortex cells, it's called osmosis. Okay, if it passes around the root cortex cells, it is called diffusion. Okay, in any case, after the water crosses the root cortex cells, it enters the xylem of the root, then moves into the xylem of the stem, where the transpiration stream is seen, and from there it enters the leaves xylem. Some of the water in the xylem of the leaf would enter the palisade mesophyll cell. This closely packed region of cells up here, where the water would be used as a raw material in photosynthesis. From the palisade mesophyll cells, the water would enter, from the xylem vessel, water would also enter the spongy mesophyll cell. Okay, just follow the black arrow. Water can move from one spongy mesophyll cell to a next or to another, and then into the air spaces around those cells. Okay, now transpiration occurs when water leaves the air spaces around the spongy mesophyll cells into or through the stomata into the atmosphere surrounding the leaf. Okay, so we say that the leaf has transpired. So be able to draw, label, and explain this diagram. Okay, so spend some time with it. So this is the internal structure of the leaf here. Okay. This is the soil. Notice that the water forms a film around the soil. The black arrows show you the direction of water movement. Okay, good. So water moves through a flowering plant by a combination of root pressure, transpiration, and capillarity. Okay, so these three processes, these three mechanisms, are used in transferring water or transporting water through a flowering plant. Okay, and we would examine them individually. So let us look at root pressure. Root pressure is a push on the water column by the roots as they absorb water from the soil. So water enters the root hairs and epidermal cells, or the cells of the epidermis, by osmosis. The water then diffuses or osmosis around the root cortex cells or through the root cortex cells by osmosis and diffusion. Okay, so the water moves through the cortex cells of the root by osmosis and diffusion. There should be osmosis and diffusion. The water is then pushed into the xylem of the root. This push is created as water moves into the root hair cells and the cortex cells by osmosis, and diffusion. The root pressure pushes the water into the xylem of the root and into the bottom of the xylem of the stem. Okay, so remember, this root pressure is this upward force on the root column as it moves from the root hair cells to the xylem of the root and the base of the xylem of the stem. Root pressure, however, is not sufficient to get the water up the entire plant. Here I have a diagram showing us root pressure. So you can see movement of water from the root hair cell to the xylem creates an upward push on the water column. Okay, movement of the water, follow the blue arrow, from the soil into the root hairs and through the root cortex creates an upward push on the water column through the roots xylem and into the base of the xylem of the stem. But as I stated, it is not sufficient to push the water column up the entire plant. So that's why we need the next mechanism of movement of water through a flowering plant called transport or transpiration, evapotranspiration, right? Transpiration is a loss of water vapor from the surface of leaves, which creates a pool called the transpiration pool on the stream of water called the transpiration stream flowing up through the xylem vessels. So from the xylem of the stem, water enters the xylem of the leaves. From there, it enters the spongy mesophyll cells of the leaves. Okay, water is drawn through other spongy mesophyll cells by osmosis also. So from one spongy mesophyll cell to the next. Okay, some of the water from the xylem vessels also enter the palisade mesophyll cells for use in photosynthesis. Remember, water is a raw material in photosynthesis. Water evaporates from the spongy mesophyll cells to the air spaces around them, and then the water vapor diffuses through the stomata, okay, into the atmosphere around the leaf. The water vapor that leaves during transpiration gets the transpiration stream going, and this forces this force of evaporation of water from the leaves is called the transpiration pool. So be able to differentiate between the transpiration pool, the transpiration stream, and transpiration itself. The transpiration pool gets the stream of water or the transpiration stream up the plant. Okay, the transpiration stream is this column of water flowing up the plant. Okay, the transpiration pool is the force that pulls that column of water. Transpiration is the loss of water from the surface of the leaves. Okay, that creates that pool on the transpiration stream. So be able to make that distinction. Okay, so as you can see here, as water moves up the stem, water moves freely up the xylem of the stem since the tube is hollow. Okay, it's hollow. Okay, there is no barrier to the movement of water up the stem. Cool. And water is transported in one direction. So transport of water in xylem is unidirectional. Now, capillarity is the next mechanism by which water moves through a flowering plant. And when we speak of capillarity, we are speaking of adhesion and cohesion. Right? Cohesion between water molecules, or cohesion is when the water molecules form weak intermolecular forces with each other that helps them bond with each other. Okay? And adhesion is when the water molecules bond to the xylem of the walls of the xylem vessels, and this adhesive and cohesive forces help maintain a continuous column of water from roots to leaves and help the water move upwards without any air spaces between them. Okay, now capillary action, remember, moves water through the xylem, so you can see a continuous stream of water moving up the plant here. Okay, and if we were to zero in on this section, you would notice that between the water molecules you have these cohesive bonds, these weak intermolecular bonds, right, can be seen. And you also have these bonds between the water molecules and the walls of xylem, or the cell wall of xylem. Okay, these bonds are called hydrogen bonds. They are weak intermolecular bond, right, and weak bonds between the water molecules and the walls of xylem. Together, adhesion and cohesion are called capillary forces. Okay, good. Now here I included this illustration of the this diagram to illustrate the movement of water through a plant. So here we have a tall tree, and this tree here, no, the water potential at the level of the root is lower than the water potential in the atmosphere. Okay, so you have this gradient of water going up the plant from low water potential to high water potential. Okay, so you want to get water to move from roots to leaves against its concentration gradient. Furthermore, you want to also get water to move against the force of gravity. So we need a mechanism to ensure that this happens. So we can see here that a section of the root is magnified, stem is also magnified, and also the leaves is magnified. Okay, so the cells of this root, stem, and leaves are shown here. So water move into the stem or into the root hairs by osmosis, then crosses the root cortex and into the xylem of the root. The force that pushes the water into the xylem of the root from the cortex and the root hair cells is called root pressure. Okay, from the xylem of the root pressure also pushes the water column into the base of the xylem of the stem. Okay, and this water moves up the stem by capillary forces, adhesion and cohesion. From the xylem of the stem, the water enters the xylem of the leaves, okay, from where some of the water would enter the palisade mesophyll cells for photosynthesis, and the rest would enter the spongy mesophyll cells. The spongy mesophyll cells, water would move from one spongy mesophyll cell to the next through osmosis, and then water would also move out of those spongy mesophyll cells into the surrounding air spaces. From the surrounding air spaces, water would pass through the stomata, okay, into the environment as, or the atmosphere around the leaf as water vapor. Okay, and this is called transpiration. This transpiration or evaporation of water from the surface of the leaf creates the transpiration pool that gets the transpiration stream up the plant. Okay, so remember that. So please study this diagram carefully, okay, and ensure that you understand everything that is presented here. Okay, now let us look at the environmental conditions affecting the rate of transpiration. If water supply in the soil is plentiful, the rate of transpiration is controlled by the interaction of different environmental conditions that affect the rates of both evaporation and diffusion. Okay, so it is not just one environmental condition, it's an interaction of different environmental conditions that not only affects evaporation but also affects diffusion. Okay, the first environmental condition we will look at is temperature. High temperatures cause water to evaporate faster and water vapor to diffuse rapidly across the surface of the leaf, so transpiration is rapid. Low temperatures, on the other hand, can cause water to evaporate and water vapor to diffuse slowly, so transpiration is slow. Okay, so high temperatures, high rate of transpiration, low temperatures, low rate of transpiration. Okay, in this graph here, it can be seen that the rate of transpiration increases, okay, increases with temperature linearly until a point is reached when, okay, irrespective of how high the temperature increases, the rate of transpiration would remain the same. Okay, so the graph plateaus here, and this is because as water evaporates from the leaves, more is taken away from the soil. Okay, this happens until the supply of water in the soil becomes low, the plant becomes flaccid, and so the stomata close. Okay, so up until this point here, temperature has been the only factor that was slowing down the rate of transpiration. Okay, but when it reaches this point here, irrespective of how high you increase the temperature, the rate of transpiration would not be affected because transpiration is no longer affected by temperature. Okay, some other factor is affecting the rate of transpiration here. Okay. Now, the next environmental condition affecting the rate of transpiration is humidity. Right? Generally, in low humidity, the concentration gradient between the water vapor in the air spaces of the leaves and the air surrounding the leaves is high. So water vapor diffuses out easily and transpiration is rapid. On the other hand, in high humidity, what is the case is that the air surrounding the leaves is almost saturated or filled with water vapor. So the concentration gradient is low compared to, right, compared to each other, and very little vapor can diffuse out, causing transpiration to be slow. Okay, so let's examine this thing carefully. If the relative humidity of the atmosphere around the leaves is low, it means that the percentage of moisture in the air or in the atmosphere is low compared to the amount of moisture it can contain. As a result, well, provided that other factors like temperature and so forth are favorable, water would flow rapidly out of the leaf and the rate of transpiration would be rapid, or the rate of transpiration would be high. On the other hand, if the relative humidity of the atmosphere around the leaves is high, it means that the percentage of moisture in the atmosphere is high compared to the level of moisture it can actually contain. As a result, provided that other factors are favorable, less water would flow out of the leaf and the rate of transpiration would be lower than it would be, right, if the humidity was low. Okay, so always remember that if the humidity is low or if the relative humidity is low, the rate of transpiration will be high, and vice versa. Okay, so in this graph here we can see that, okay, high humidity, low rate of transpiration, low humidity, high rate of transpiration. Okay, so it's an inverse proportional relationship. So as humidity increases, transpiration rate decreases. Okay, however, the transpiration rate would never get to zero. Some water would always be leaving the stomata of the leaf. Okay, it just may not be as much as if the humidity would be low. Okay, now the next environmental condition affecting the rate of transpiration is wind speed. Now, in windy conditions, water vapor is carried away from the surface of leaves, so more can diffuse out and transpiration is rapid. However, if the condition is still, okay, or the wind is not blowing, the air is not moving, the water vapor remains around the leaves and very little can diffuse out, so transpiration is slow. Okay, now some texts may use the term wind velocity instead of wind speed. Okay, wind velocity actually takes into consideration not only wind speed but also wind direction. Okay, however, the effect on the rate of transpiration would be the same. Right, so what would happen on a hot windy day? Well, the rate of transpiration would increase because the atmosphere is heated. Okay, and this would cause evaporation to occur faster. Okay, and because wind speed is very high, it's a windy day, the moisture around the surface of the leaves would be blown away, decreasing the level of saturation outside the surface of the leaf, right? Creating more room for water to move from inside the air spaces of the leaf to the, the area around the surface of the leaf, further increasing the rate of transpiration. So on a hot windy day, the rate of transpiration would be very high. Okay, good. Now on a hot still day, however, okay, the rate of transpiration would not be as high as it would be on a hot windy day, and that is because, okay, although the increased atmospheric temperature causes evaporation of water from the leaves to occur more readily, the area around the outside of the leaves would be saturated with vapor. Okay, as a result, the gradient across the surface of the leaf in terms of moisture content would not be large enough for water vapor to move from inside the leaf to outside the leaf as readily. Okay, so as a result, the rate of transpiration would not be as large as it would be on a hot windy day. Okay, so Now what I want you to do is predict what would happen on a cold windy day and on a cold still day. As an assignment, okay, describe or discuss what would happen to the rate of transpiration on a cold windy day as compared to a cold still day, or a cold day that is not windy, right? Good. Now here we have this graph showing us the effect of wind speed on the rate of transpiration, wind speed on the x-axis, right? Rate of transpiration on the y-axis, right? Now, before I go into the explanation of the shape of this graph, I must reiterate that the increase in air movement increases the rate at which moisture is blown away from around the outer surface of leaves, okay, making them less saturated and hence creating a favorable condition for more water vapor to diffuse through the stomata and transpiration to consequently increase. Now from this graph we can see that the rate of transpiration is faster initially. That's why the slope here is steeper than the slope here, okay? Now this is because more water vapor is removed from the outer surface of the leaves when the wind begins than as it continues to blow, okay? So as the wind continues to blow from here, the rate of transpiration would increase. However, the increase would not be as marked or as rapid as when the wind initially started blowing. Okay, so that is what I want you to understand here. Ensure that you're understanding those graphs. Right? Now, the last environmental condition affecting the rate of transpiration is light intensity. Okay, when we are talking about the intensity of light, we are talking about the brightness of light, or how bright or how dim light is, or how bright or dark. Dim is synonymous to dark. Okay, so bright light, high light intensity. Okay, dim light, low light intensity. Okay, so we'd have high light intensity generally during the day and low light intensity generally at night. Okay, now in bright light the stomata are fully open, so water vapor can diffuse out easily and transpiration is rapidly happening. In dim light, however, the stomata closes, so little water vapor can diffuse out of the leaf and transpiration would be slow. Okay, so transpiration occurs faster in bright light. Not that light intensity directly affects the rate of transpiration, but light intensity affects the opening and closing of the stomata of the leaves, and whenever the stomata is open, the rate of transpiration would increase. So that is how light intensity indirectly affects the rate of transpiration. Okay, here in this graph we can see the effect of light intensity on the rate of transpiration. Initially, the rate of transpiration increases linearly with light intensity. However, it reaches a point where the graph plateaus or flattens out. Okay, this is the point or the region of zero increase or no change in the rate of transpiration. So light intensity is increasing, but the rate of transpiration is not changing. What does that tell you? It tells us that no, the rate of transpiration is not limited by light intensity anymore. Okay, it means that some other factor is limiting the process or slowing down the process, right? Not light intensity. Light intensity was limiting until it reached that point. Okay, that point here where it started changing, and some other factor was also limiting until light intensity was completely out of the picture. Okay, and that's true with any factor that affects a process. If you increase the level of a particular factor or condition, okay, as it continues to increase exponentially, the chances of that factor negatively affecting the process would be lower. Okay, if it is needed for the process to occur effectively. Okay, now furthermore, as water is left from the surface of the leaves, or as water evaporates from the leaves, water from the soil is pulled into the roots or pushed into the root hairs. Okay, and there's only so much water in the soil. After a while, there would not be sufficient water, so transpiration would not occur as readily. Okay, and that is how light intensity affects the rate of transpiration. Okay, it's not like we have an infinite supply of water in the soil. Okay, good. Let us now look at the importance of transpiration to plants. Now, transpiration is important to plants for the following reason. Well, first of all, it draws water up the leaves for use in photosynthesis. Remember that water is needed for photosynthesis. In the light reactions of photosynthesis, right? Sunlight splits water molecules, right? And the hydrogen is used to reduce carbon dioxide, right, to form glucose, okay, in the dark reaction or the light independent reaction. So water is very important to photosynthesis. Okay, now transpiration also supplies plants with water to keep them turgid or firm, and this turgidity or firmness is needed especially in non-woody or plants of non-woody stems to support them and keep them upright and to keep the leaves of plants in shape. Okay, so you ever notice that when a plant has not been watered for a while, the leaves tend to droop, okay, or lie down. But as soon as you water the plant and a few minutes or so pass, you realize the leaves stand upright, or they are more firm and so forth. They are not lying down anymore. That's because as the water flows into the leaves of the plants, the leaves can now stand in the correct position because of the turgidity of the cells, right? Water move into the leaf cells by osmosis and cause those cells to become turgid, and the leaf can now stand up, right? Stand firm as they are alive. Okay, moving water also carries dissolved minerals from roots to leaves. Okay, minerals salts have to dissolve in water to be taken up by plants. Okay, so that's another importance of water. Now, just as all living organisms, plants carry out biological reactions, and those reactions are affected in some way by increase or decrease in temperature, right? Now, because you have enzymes involved that can only function within a certain range of temperatures. So if the temperature is too high, the reaction may slow down. Okay, or the reaction may stop altogether. Okay, if it's too low, the reaction may slow down and would not happen as effectively, right? So evaporation is necessary to cool the plant and to ensure that the reactions happening within the plant happens at an efficient rate. Okay, so evaporation of water from the surface of leaves cools the plant. Right, now let us look at water conservation in plants. And when we talk about water conservation in plants, we are also talking about osmoregulation in plants, right? Because water conservation is also known as osmoregulation. Osmo means water, regulation means to regulate. Okay, so osmoregulation, you are regulating the water content of plants. Okay, so irrespective of changes in the external environment, you want to ensure that the amount of water in the plant remain relatively constant. So it's a type of homeostatic, okay, response. Now you can conserve water in plants by three methods or three ways. You can control the loss of water. The plant can modify itself or adapt to lose less water. It can also adapt to store more water, or it can adapt itself to uptake or take up more water from the soil. Okay, and we would examine how that is done as we go along. Now, plants control the loss of water through the leaves by opening and closing the stomata at appropriate times. Okay, because water would leave the surface of the leaf through the stomatal pores. The stomata is found mainly in the lower surface of the leaves, okay, and they control water loss by transpiration. Now, the stomata is open when the guard cells around them are turgid. The guard cells control the opening and closing of the stomata. So when those guard cells become turgid, okay, the stomata open, and this results in rapid transmission of water across, right, the stomata into the atmosphere from the spaces inside the leaf. And the stomata would almost, the guard cells, when the guard cells become flaccid, flaccid is the opposite of turgid, right? The stomata would almost close, resulting in slow transmission. Okay? If the supply of water in the soil is low, plant cells become flaccid, so the stomata almost close. This reduces the loss of water by transpiration and conserve water. Now, a plant will wilt when it loses more water in transpiration than it can absorb from, that its roots can take up. Okay, so the plant want to ensure that it is not losing more water than it is getting, right? Just as a business individual do not want to lose more money than he is receiving, right? He wants to ensure that his revenue is greater than its expenditure. Same with the plant. The revenue, right, in terms of water by the plant is the uptake of water. The expenditure is the amount of water given off during transpiration. The plant wants to ensure that the amount of water given out during transpiration does not exceed the amount of water it can take up through its root. Okay, and when the plant can do that, that is called water conservation or osmoregulation. So here we have the stomata. Okay, we have a diagram showing the opening and closing of the stomata. To the left we have an open stoma, right? Singular stoma, plural stomata. So the guard cells would take in water by photosynthesis, by osmosis, sorry, for photosynthesis. And when the water moves into the guard cells, right, the volume of water and the pressure of water on the inside of the membrane becomes larger, and the pressure begins to push against the cell wall. The thick cell wall would not stretch, but the thin cell wall would stretch under the pressure. Okay, the thin cell wall, the thin outer cell wall would stretch under the pressure, and that would cause the guard cells to expand, become turgid, and when they become turgid, right, the stomata or the stoma here would open and cause water to flow out of the leaf. Okay, so that the guard cells can become less turgid. Now on the right we have a stoma that is closed. Okay, that's because water would have left the leaf, the stoma, the guard cells by osmosis, causing the pressure and volume inside here to decrease, and the guard cells shrink and become flaccid. As a result, the stoma closes and water can hardly pass through. Okay, so this is a mechanism used by the stomata to open and close. Okay, now there are also other adaptations that plants use to conserve water. So in addition to the stomata almost closing when water supplies in the soil are low, terrestrial plants or plants on land have developed other adaptations to help them conserve water. So especially those plants living in dry regions and those plants living in regions of high salinity. Right? Plants that live in dry regions are called xerophytes. Xerophytes, example, desert plants, and those that live in regions of high salinity, we call them halophytes. Right? Example, coastal plants. So these plants develop special adaptations, right, to conserve water, right, because of the conditions that they live in. But many of those adaptations to conserve water rely on the reduction of the rate of transpiration. Okay, but before I go into that in detail, I want to mention that apart from xerophytes and halophytes, we also have hydrophytes and mesophytes. And hydrophytes are plants such as water lilies and eludia, which live in fresh water. Okay, they have a constant supply of water, and they do not need to develop special structures for osmoregulation or water conservation. Okay, the mesophytes, on the other hand, are land plants, and they normally have enough water to meet their needs. The majority of flowering plants are mesophytes, by the way. And the biggest problem is water loss through transpiration. Okay, as a result, they may develop structures or certain behaviors to prevent water loss. For example, they might have a waxy cuticle on the leaves. They might have protected stomata. They might curl the leaves, and the leaves may be very small. Okay, so these are adaptation by these plants to curb water loss. Okay, now let us look at the three large categories of methods used to conserve water. That is reducing the rate of transpiration, storing water, and increasing the uptake of water by roots. Okay, so the adaptations to reduce the rate of transpiration are, well, the leaves have extra thick waxy cuticles, right? The waxy cuticle is this waterproof layer above the surface of the leaf, above the upper epidermis of the leaf. Okay, so the waxy cuticle can have extra thickness. Okay, the leaves also may have a reduced number of stomata. If the number of stomata in the leaves is not as much, then the rate of transpiration would be lower. Okay, the stomata may also be grouped or collectively located in sunken pits in the epidermis. Okay, where water vapor is trapped within those ditches. Like example, the oleander bush or the oleander flower, or you might say the oleander plant. Okay, that is how it conserves water. Its stomata are located in sunken pits on the surface of the leaf. Okay, you would see a picture of that in a while. The stomata also almost close in the daytime if temperatures are very high or extremely high, and they would open at night when outside is cooler and the plant is cooler, so less water is lost. Leaves also can roll up themselves with the stomata inside of the rolled surface, like what is seen in the Marram grass. Okay, the leaves also have fine hairs on the surfaces to trap water vapor. Okay, remember, if you could trap water vapor around the surface of the leaf, the humidity there, or the level of moisture there, would increase, and as a result, the rate of transpiration would decrease, because if the humidity is high, transpiration would be low. Remember, it's an inverse relationship between humidity and transpiration. As one increase, the other one decrease. So if humidity is high, transpiration would be low. If humidity is low, transpiration will be high. Okay, now the surface area of the leaves of some of those leaves of those plants could also be reduced. Example, the needle-shaped leaves of conifers. Okay, the spines of cacti. Cacti is a plural for cactus. Cactus is singular, cacti is plural. Okay, also the scales of the casuarina plant, right? They are adapted to reduce the surface area of the leaves and thereby reduce the rate of transpiration. Some plants also shed their leaves, or they give off their leaves in the dry season. Most of transpiration occurs through the leaves, so the less leaves a plant have, the lower the rate, or its rate of transpiration, and the more it is able to conserve water. But apart from reducing the rate of transpiration, plants could also store water, like succulent plants. Succulent plants could either store water in the leaves, like in the case of aloes, or in the stem, as in the case of cactus or cacti. The baobab tree also stores water in its trunk, and it can store a huge amount of water in its trunk. Okay, the roots of some plants can also store water. Example, some members of the pumpkin family can store water in their roots. Okay, now thirdly, plants can also increase the uptake of water. Okay, and plants take up water by the roots, the root hairs. Okay, now the plant can increase its uptake water by growing very long and deep tap root system. Remember, if a plant has a tap root, you have one main root, right, from the stem going down into the soil. So a plant can have a very long and deep tap root, right, in order to absorb water from deep underwater reservoir underground reservoirs in the soil. Okay. Opposed to that, the plant may also have shallow root system, but not just shallow but widespread. Okay, so it can absorb water from a wide cross section of area, okay, of topsoil. Good. So here we have a microscopic image showing the internal structure of the oleander leaf with stomata and sunken pits, right? So this is one of those sunken pits here. The stomata is concentrated or grouped in this region, okay, and you have these hair cells here that trap moisture there, right, increasing the humidity, okay, and shading the stomata from wind, okay, with the wind currents and light intensity. So if you increase humidity, decrease wind exposure and light exposure, you could decrease the rate of transpiration. Okay, same here. Okay, the part of the epidermis that is not folded actually has no stomata at all. Okay, the stomata are only found in the sunken pits. Okay, here you have your palisade cells, right, your spongy mesophyll cells and so forth, right? So the exposed surfaces here have no stomata. Okay, the stomata are only found here. Okay, and the plant can trap moisture in those sunken pits, right? Okay, increasing the humidity and decreasing the rate of transpiration. Good. This is an actual picture of the oleander bush or the oleander flower, what it looks like. I'm sure most of you would have seen it before. Okay, I just decided to include that plant there so you would have an idea. Here we have a light micrograph showing the rolled leaf of the Marram grass. Notice you have an unfolded surface on the outside and a folded surface on the inside. You have this large, right, folds and troughs. Okay, the stomata would be located in these deep areas of the folds, right? That's where the stomata are located. So they are far, right, by far hidden from wind and sunlight on the outside. Okay, so that would have that would be a positive adaptation to help them withstand, right, water loss or curb water loss, and as a result decrease the rate of transpiration. Okay, also you have these spikes on the surface of the folds, and these spikes help trap moisture within the folds. Okay, so when the moisture gets trapped in there, they can condense and form droplets of water. Okay, and as a result, because the moisture is high, extremely high outside the surface of the leaf, the rate of transpiration will decrease because, right, the concentration of water outside is high compared to inside. As a matter of fact, those moisture can be trapped there for so long that after a while the water can actually diffuse back into one of those stomatal pores. Okay, but the idea is that if the moisture outside the surface of the leaf is high, the rate of transpiration will be low. Okay, and the fact that it's folded, the stomata is hidden from, right, contact with wind and light, so transpiration would be low also, right? So three mechanisms here are used to reduce transpiration: reduce exposure to light, reduce exposure to wind, and increased relative humidity, right? Once this three is there, then you have decreased rate of transpiration. Okay, now if water becomes available again, then the leaf can unfold itself because of osmotic pressure in certain specialized hinge cells at the base of those deep areas. Okay, the leaf can unfold itself when water becomes available again. Now here we have what this is a picture to show what the Marram grass look like. They are found growing on sand dunes where the water would drain through the sand easily and not be retained as in normal soil. Okay, and by the way, sand dunes are those large masses of wind-blown sand most common in deserted area and in large seashores. Okay, the main grass found growing around sand dunes are marram grass. Okay, marram grass, and they are adapted to live in those conditions because of the folded leaves. Okay, to increase humidity and reduce exposure to light and wind. Okay, good. Now here we have an image of the succulent stem of the needle-shaped cactus, right? The needles on the surface of the stem are actually modified leaves. Okay, they break up the evaporative winds blowing across the plant surface. Okay, they also help provide shade to the stem, right, to help limit the rate of transpiration. An added advantage or an added adaptation of cacti is that they utilize a special mechanism for photosynthesis called CAM photosynthesis. The stomata would be closed during the day and only opened at nights when the outside is cooler and the rate of transpiration will be less. Okay, so they can conserve their water. Okay, so that is the succulent stem of the needle-shaped cactus. We also have the famous baobab tree, right? The famous baobab tree. Notice the hugeness of the trunk. Okay, the huge trunks is not just, right, xylem cells and so forth, but there is a lot of water, huge quantity of water that is stored in those stems, okay, or those trunks. Okay, and it's actually a wonder because those plants can store up to 30,000 gallons of water in the trunk. Okay, and notice also the branches are very short and they barely have leaves. Okay, so as a result, the rate of transpiration would be markedly decreased. Okay, and they store a ridiculously huge amount of water in the trunk. Okay, so they are by far well adapted to survive in those deserted areas where they are found. Okay, where they are found. That's a baobab tree. It's sometimes called the tree of life. Okay, so take that into consideration. We also have the casuarina tree with its scaly leaves. Okay, and what actually look like leaves are actually branchlets, photosynthetic, right? Light green. Some of them are actually grayish, photosynthetic branches. Okay, that they are able to carry out photosynthesis. Okay, and they have scales on the surface that decrease the rate of transpiration. Okay, so just observe the scaly leaves here, or branchlets, right, that reduce the rate of transpiration, and the branchlets are able to carry out photosynthesis. Okay, so that's the scale leaves of the casuarina plant. Okay, so thank you for listening to this video presentation, and I hope that you would have grasped most of the content that was presented. Remember, you can pause the video now and again, or you can listen it more than once to ensure that you grasp all the concepts that are presented. Please feel free to like the video and provide a comment in the box. Tell me what you think, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.